So now we will review homework exercise 15, focused on logical relations. And in this exercise, you need to identify the logical relationship between each of the following pairs of statements. For some pairs, you will not be able to use the table of opposition because the statements are not constructed using the same subject and predicate terms. But in those cases where you have the same subject and predicate terms, you may use the table of opposition. So, number one, some dogs are animals with fleas, and some dogs are not animals with fleas. And you'll recognize here that both of these statements could be true at the same time, but their denials are incompatible. And so, in this case, the first pair are sub-contrary. Number two, no faculty members are infallible teachers. All faculty members are infallible teachers. Now, of course, both of these statements cannot be true at the same time. The statements are incompatible. But what are their denials? Remember that the denial of a universal is the particular of the opposite quality, and the particulars of the opposite quality could be true at the same time, making these statements contraries. Number three, no non-fat desserts are sweet products. Some sweet products are not non-fat desserts. So in this case, we have a universal negative and then a particular negative. And the same terms are present, but you'll notice they're in a different position, subject and predicate, in the second statement. But still, we know we start with a universal negative, and we could convert that statement. And if we did, we would have no sweet products are non-fat desserts. And then we have the particular negative with the same subject and predicate term. Some sweet products are not non-fat desserts. And so in this case, we have implication because the universal negative implies the truth of the particular negative with the same subject and predicate terms. You just have to convert the first statement to put those subject and predicate terms in the same place. Number four, all Romans are toga-wearing citizens. Some Romans are not toga-wearing citizens. Now, of course, you look at these and you say they cannot be true at the same time, for if all Romans are toga-wearing, there can't be some who are not. And so we would then ask, well, if the statements are incompatible, are their denials incompatible? And in fact, each statement is the denial of the other statement, so the denials are also incompatible, making these statements contradictory. Number five, some football teams are playoff contenders, and some football teams are not playoff contenders. We recognize here that these statements can be true at the same time, and so they're not incompatible, but their denials, which would be the universals of the opposite quality, the denials are incompatible, and so these again are sub-contrary. Number six, all logic students are quick thinkers, and all non-quick thinkers are non-logic students. So we have two universal affirmatives, but in the second statement here, we've got substitution of the complementary terms and the position of the two terms converted. You may recognize then that the second statement is the contraposition of the first statement, which should be the clue that these are equivalent statements. Number seven, the virus was deadly. The virus was not deadly. Now, obviously, these cannot be true at the same time. And so we would ask, well, what about the denial of the statement? In this case, we're talking about a single entity making up the whole category, or in other words, the word virus is referring to just a single organism. So there's only one member of the category. So it's not possible to make a particular as the denial. So typically in a universal affirmative, the denial would be the particular negative with the same subject and predicate term. Or with a universal negative, the denial would be the particular affirmative with the same subject and predicate term. But in this instance, because we have subject terms that represent categories with only one organism in the category, it is not possible to make a particular, which means that the denials are here are incompatible, and the original statements are also incompatible, which means these are contradictory statements. Number 8, her dress was blue. Her dress was yellow. So in this case, assuming we're talking about the same dress and it has only one color, we know that the statements cannot be true at the same time. But their denials could be true at the same time. The denial of the first statement is her dress was not blue. The denial of the second statement would be her dress was not yellow. And of course, if she was wearing a red dress or a white dress or a green dress, then both of those denial statements could be true. So we have statements that are contrary. That is to say, the statements are incompatible, but their denials are not incompatible. Number 9, Ned bought the car from Seamus. Seamus sold the car to Ned. So here we have a case of implication, not with the same subject and predicate terms and not in standard logical form, but we know if the first statement is true, then the second statement must also be true, and that is implication. Number 10, Madison is America's greatest city. Madison is not America's greatest city. And in this case, like one of the previous examples related to the virus, right, we have universal statements. We have a universal affirmative in the first statement and a universal negative in the second statement. And how do we know that? Well, because there's only one city of Madison. That is, the subject term here is a term that represents a class or category that has only one member. So it is not possible to make a particular as the denial of either of these statements, which means the statements themselves are incompatible, and their denials, which would simply be the same statements in a different order, the denials are also incompatible. And so these are contradictory statements. Number 11, no players are free agents. Some players are not free agents. So in this case, and this may be easy, you could quickly look at the table of opposition and see you have a universal negative and a particular negative with the same subject and predicate terms. If the first statement is true, the second statement must also be true. The universal negative implies the truth of the particular negative with the same subject and predicate terms. This then is another implication. Number 12, some non-students are class members, and some class members are non-students. So in this case, we have two particular affirmatives. The non-students is the negative or the denial or the complement of the term. It doesn't change the quality of the statement. So we have two particular affirmative statements, and we know with particular affirmatives that we can convert those statements, and so we have here logically equivalent statements. Number 13, all angels are invisible beings. Some angels are not invisible beings. So in this case, we have a universal affirmative statement and a particular negative statement with the same subject and predicate terms. You will probably recognize that the second statement is the denial of the first statement, and obviously those are incompatible, but also the first statement is the denial of the second statement, and that makes them incompatible as well, making these contradictory statements. Number 14, all uninformed voters are unmotivated citizens. And then all motivated citizens are informed voters. So if we take that first statement, the universal affirmative, and we also have a universal affirmative in the second statement, and what do you notice about it? That is, the terms have been replaced by their complements and they have switched positions, or the statement has been converted. So the second statement is the contraposition of the first statement, and so we have again equivalent statements. And then finally, the hotel is not a non-smoking establishment, and the hotel is a non-smoking establishment. So again, this is one of those instances where we have a subject term that represents a class or category with a single object or place in it. We're talking about a single hotel. So again, it's not possible to make particulars as denial statements. The two statements are obviously incompatible, and the two statements are also the denials of each other. So the denials are also incompatible, and so we have again contradictory statements. So that's a review of exercise 15 on logical relations. If you have a question about any of the items on this exercise, please post them to the discussion board.